Hey everyone, it's DeadpoolNegative. I'm here with a interesting review of a film I saw a couple days ago. Um, it was a documentary, and I don't normally enjoy watching documentaries too much because I think a lot of them, regardless of the subject matter, are very meant to push an agenda. I mean, I'm talking modern day documentaries, and I do mean that. And this documentary was no exception quite in the end. But I it was a subject I found just very interesting, and it concerns a streamer called Gothix. Now, Gothix has been a streamer that's working since 2018 in content. Started off as a gaming and comedy sketches streamer, but pivoted more post the George Floyd riots. Pivoted more to political commentary, and then she converted to Christianity in 2021. And also, I've watched her stuff, and while I will freely admit I am at the ideological opposite of her. I don't find her content offensive. I just find it incredibly boring and smug. But again, most ideologues who do a big switchover are smug. Left, right, left, whatever. So that's not the issue. But in 20, well, this documentary was started filming in 2021, and was shot partial was the debut of the Lore TV streaming service, which was a conservative focused streaming service, documentaries, animated shorts, a bunch of other stuff. And I first heard of Gothix sometime around, like, I mean, I've heard of Gothix, but I saw the content wasn't for me, and I moved on with my life. There was a big to do, particularly early last year, when she got into the movie came out, and she got into some conflicts with a streamer group that I'd never even heard of called Black Girl Gamers. And she said, this will be explained later in my review. Um, they had harassed her, members of the group had harassed her during her first cancellation, which was in 2019. She didn't become fully political until after the George Floyd riots. Um, but she had a cancellation in 2019 for, again, I'm about to explain it, but it was a weird blah blah back and forth. She started calling Black Girl Gamers liars, the juicy smoothie of streamers. Like, she attacked the community. The thing was, like, I had never heard of Black Girl Gamers until Gothic started screaming about them. Um, and then, and I did a little research, and Black Girl Gamers gave a really like, she accused them of harassing her during the cancellation and afterwards. And Black Girl Gamers, the funny thing was, I almost, like, there's the weird paranoid part of me that thought, is Black Girl Gamers a false op? Because I have literally never heard of them until one of their former members started attacking them publicly. But that's not the case. I actually found, like, she was part of two streaming groups, the Cookout, which is now folded, and Black Girl Gamers, which is not mentioned in the Gothics documentary. Um, and but eventually, like, they released a statement. She released her statements. Ron Coleman was somehow involved. I don't know. And I just, like, oh, okay, whatever. And then I moved on. And, like, that movie came, like, recently she was hired by the Rippaverse. Again, not a person I'm particularly a fan of. I've read a couple Rippa books. I find them, uh, it's not that great, not terrible, but definitely like a guy written by a guy who's just really not really sure. I can't really explain it. Like, the art's not great, but the primary difference between, like, Gothics and, say, Eric July, when Eric July talks about politics, he's not boring. Again, ideological opposite of the spectrum, but and he can be really just infuriating a lot and just plain downright mean and awful. But he ain't boring. But he hired her to be the spokesman, and technically she still is. But Ripa July is still doing videos about him, about the company, which was why he hired her. I don't think it helped. Like when he hired her, and they're both about Christians, so that made sense. Um, I thought like, okay, she like, and there was also an implication she was actually going to write a project for them. But then she would do live streams where she would say stuff like, "Yeah, I don't read comics. You know, they're too expensive. My husband does." What? Like, did you just tape the job because he was a fellow Christian? I'm like genuinely confused as to. But again, it's like this woman really likes talking about her haters. And to be fair, I think she had a very good reason to be talking about her haters, which I think the movie, to its credit, does a very good job explaining of why getting a lot of hate online can really just accomplish nothing for the hater and just make someone miserable for what. But anyway, I'm gonna go to straight to the movie. Now I'm gonna go to the movie. Gothix opens, in 2021. It's the first feature of Graeme Wilson. He reminds me, as conservative documentaries go, a lot of Steve Bannon. Only he's better at actually making whatever he points he wants to make than Steve Bannon. But he also has this weird, for example, the movie starts in 2021 with Gothix and her then fiance, current husband, um, moving out of their apartment in Providence, Rhode Island, and there's a lot of news footage of like how crime ridden that place is, but it doesn't really seem to me. They don't even state that's why they're moving, and the place they moved to doesn't look much better. And I was and the I guess the assumption is this is a Democrat-run city, but Wilson doesn't point that out. It just seems like completely unnecessary. But we get to the meat of the matter is the first time Gothix was canceled. Now, in 2019, the Little Mermaid um, movie was announced to star a black actress named Halle Berry. Little Mermaid live action movie from Disney. Well, wearing red hair, Ariel. And there was a lot of pushback to that. Like it became yet another cause celeb of the fandom menace. I didn't care. I mean, it's a fantasy. Like race swapping doesn't bother me when it's in a fantasy setting too much. Personally, I don't think race swapping is bother me, not because of any virtual signal. I just don't. It's just they keep doing it, and they're never going to stop doing it, unless we can prove to them we don't care and it won't get eyeballs on them. But everybody kind of falls for it. But in the case of something like Little Mermaid or Wheel of Time, Lord of the Rings, I just don't care. I don't see why it should bother me or anyone else. But that does not mean I'm going to go log on to X, which I don't have, or anywhere else and say, you know what? Anyone who disagrees with this is racist. Anyone who, doesn't like this is racist. This is racist if you like. I mean, if you think about like, you could argue that it is racist if you get really mad about this and you post weird pictures of how far apart Halle Bailey's eyes are and obsessively check at the box office numbers. I mean, there was one streamer I watched sometimes who, again, like, if I had to put, or like, when Death was played by a black actress in Sandman, when it was established in the comics that Death can be black, but I remember I was watching a streamer who was a friend of mine talk to another streamer who was dead set against watching Sandman. And he said, no, 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 Howell Baptiste is really good in the role. She's really excellent. You should really give it a chance. And this other guy he was talking to was a white British bald dude, looked like he was about to burst out crying. Like he was about to say, but if I don't like it, they'll call me racist. Like he looked genuinely like he was going to cry. Like he was trying to beg my friend not to talk about this anymore. Like, again, if you're worried about somebody online thinking you're racist because of opinion, I mean, if, as long as that opinion, and if it's your job to, yeah, it's, I don't see the need to get angry about it or just post comments like say, oh, that's an opinion I agree with, or oh, that's an opinion that's dumb, and move on. Or do what I do and like either just make a little rant on my private Facebook page or just boot up word processor, type something really mean until it's out of your system, and then delete it. Nobody took my advice when it came to Gothix, because Gothix at one point was the way. Okay, the the movie is frames it as she was persecuted for, well, not the movie. It's more like the ad. She was persecuted for having a different opinion. The way she explained it, and the original tweet is lost to time. I've never seen a capture of it. She felt, the way she frames it is she felt so annoyed with all the negativity on being dropped on people who didn't like that the Little Mermaid was black. She said, look, it doesn't necessarily mean you're racist if you don't like this casting. And at that point, I mean, again, can I really say that it's it's framed in later reviews like she went off the plantation. She went up. She wasn't, the way she says it and frames it like it's not some sort of daring. She's just tired. Like she's just trying to be positive and nice. And like there's even like the pinned post is a clip of her saying how a Disney movie forced me to change. That says something like how a Disney movie made me question everything I believe. Now that's the difficult thing at the beginning of the documentary. Gothix never really pins down what her political awakening seems to really have happened during the George Floyd riots in the middle of 2020, because she never really frames what her exact politics are. I mean, later she's done those walk away events, which makes me assume she was liberal. She does say back then she considered Donald Trump a racist. And there is a Christian streamer who, in the Fandom Menace parlance, anti-SGW parlance, would be called a blue-haired land whale. I mean, she's actually one of the more interesting characters. There's only two characters, not characters, excuse me, two people in the movie I really found myself really liking. Gothix I didn't dislike, but I felt she was held at a distance. And that was the streamer that was her friend that Gothix cut ties with after she found her friend voted for Trump, and Gothix's fiance and later husband Eric. I might be getting his name wrong. Sorry that he because it's not Eric July. It's just a guy named it's Eric Lopez, I believe his name is. But they show footage of them when they were younger, of it partying and this friend of hers who got, because at the time Gothix felt Trump was racist. She was angry at her conservative friend for voting for Trump. I was like, did you not see that coming? And she cut ties with her, and it's very sad. And I appreciated her friend's willingness to show her grace, and not just be, and it seemed genuine and not just, well, she's flipped to my side now. Now we're friends again. It seemed like her friend was a genuinely very forgiving person, which I appreciated. But I think Wilson is very good at, he just lets the comments speak for themselves. There's also a mention of the Cookout, which was a since dissolved streamer group. She mentions, she wanted to be an entertainer. She wanted to stream. And she fell into streaming, and it was and you show footage of her before this this cancellation, and she seems like a lot of more fun than she is now. where she just kind of just drones on and on. And it's kind of sad because this onslaught of attacks by she charged both Black Girl Gamers and the Cookout with harassing members of the Cookout and Black Girl Gamers harassing her. But there's no hard evidence of that. But then again, like Black Girl Gamers said, there were other things that Gothix was doing that were making us unhappy. But there's no hard evidence of that either. It seems, but and like there's these shots of Gothix sitting there. Like I don't. Why is this? It's just one opinion. Why and like they just show the negative comments, and it really makes you think like, what is this accomplished by going on and yelling at like, yes, at one point the person has to say, okay, I got to be done with the haters. But on the other hand, it's like, why do you need to like what aside from the dopamine hit, what does this mean comment actually accomplish? Calling her slurs that as a white person I don't feel comfortable saying. So he's it just like and like they show her like trying to go log on and she's all upset, and they have her they play audio of her talking about it, and it really is it again the first half of the film is really Wilson at his best, but he really causes you the viewer to question like, okay, this woman had an opinion I don't like or disagree with. Why did she deserve? She didn't deserve to be kicked around, at least not as much as like she felt so depressed and unhappy that she, according to her, attempted suicide. But there's a weird bit where they show footage of her pointing to a scar on her head and saying, "Oh yeah, I didn't wear a helmet in some outing with her fiance." And then like they play footage of her saying she attempted suicide, and I'm like, is that like I thought that they were going to explain that the scar on her head was from the suicide attempt, but it's not. It's frustrating because I think Wilson, every time Wilson finds a good thread, he messes it up. But it's weird, like saying, "Oh, it all started with this cancellation." When, no, she was just trying to live her life after this cancellation. She wasn't. She definitely felt like she couldn't trust any of her fellow liberals. I mean, she doesn't really talk about her politics, like except that it's left of center. She thought Trump was racist. I'll leave it to you to think I'll leave it to you to assume what I think of Trump, especially after today. But and then things start rolling on. Then the riots of summer 2020 happen. And Wilson does this thing. He just shows footage. He shows footage of the original video, shows footage of the riots, and excuse me, shows footage of the riots, and then he does dramatic music. It's very, it's unnecessary. Let me put it that way. He doesn't need to put a huge orchestral score on these riots. I think he should have just let the footage speak for itself, because he makes what I consider a pretty catastrophic mistake. And this is where Gothic's ideology actually begins to turn, because in the middle of these riots, she's all depressed and still unhappy with the way she's been treated. And then I discovered Thomas Sowell. Now, here's my opinion of Thomas Sowell real quick. He is an excellent persuasive. He is an excellent writer. He is very persuasive in his arguments. But he's always talking about problems. He has no idea what a solution is. And the solution is unless the solution is that won't work. Saying that won't work over and over and over again. But to her, it's a revelation. And here's where it gets really irritating. The music swells, and there's pictures and pictures after Soul, and like, you know, who is this movie about? Gothix or Thomas Sowell? There's footage of him talking about totally unrelated stuff, not talking about the riots, not talking about doing the whole. I mean, he does talk about how he feels about members of the black community who feel disenfranchised and that they shouldn't be, considered internal victims. You know, that's always been his position. But it's also like, I wonder if obviously Graeme Wilson is a conservative. Lore TV is very upfront about that. But why, for 5 minutes, does this thing become a Thomas Sowell hagiography? I don't understand it. It really just makes Wilson look silly. You know, and again, her husband, who seems like he seems really fun in a way that she, post ideological conversion, isn't. Like, he doesn't really get to say much, but I wish I had heard more from him. I wish I had heard more from how he felt about, like, seeing his, you know, what it was like. He'd get up every morning and see his wife sitting there staring, like the way Gothix describes herself, as sitting there staring out the window, afraid to log in and do her job. I think that would have actually made Gothix's case a little better, that she could have come off as more sympathetic. I think initially she does come off sympathetic, but once she becomes, for lack of a better term, soul-pilled, she just, like, the term from one ideological prison to another isn't really apt, because I don't know what her real ideology was pre-2019, pre-2020. She's not specific about it, again. But it just seems like, and of course, that's like, she's not happy. She doesn't really seem much happier now than she did when she was depressed. And that leads to another surprise reveal at the end, but I'm not getting there. I'm not there yet. It is funny to watch a documentary that is about, there's actually a point where she starts talking about her new ideological viewpoint, and then Wilson will all of a sudden stop and mute her to show another mean Twitter comment about her, which I thought was doing her a disservice. Like, you know, like, yeah, I know people say gross shit about black conservatives that has no business in polite society simply because they're black conservatives. Smugness isn't a crime, you know. But it did kind of make me do a double take when she's, you know, talking, you know, quoting Soul and saying, oh yeah, like, you know, saying black people should not be a victim, should not, you know, wallow in their victimhood. When I'm watching an entire documentary about a black woman how was victimized, and you know, the point of view is that I think it wants me to be outraged. It wants me to change my mind about being a liberal. It's going to take more than that. Sorry, Mr. Wilson. And that, again, like in this, like the more it kind of transitions, the more it becomes some sort of populist. It becomes less about Gothix the person and more like Gothix the brand. And I wasn't sure how I felt about that. There's a scene where they're going to Coeur d'Alene, Ohio, to visit someone, Gothix and her husband, and it turns out to be the filmmaker, his father and his brother. Like, what is this? Is this now an advertisement for Lore TV? I mean, I'm glad stuff like Lore TV exists, but what does this have to do with Gothix's journey? You know, like, as I understand it, Wilson contacted her in 2021 to make the film. And then we get to the very, very end, and this is where I started having a real problem with what... It's not so much that the movie did something I feel dishonest, it just felt like it buried the lead. Because it jumps from 2021 to a sit-down with Wilson in 2023, where Gothix now reveals she is fully converted to Christianity. They show a brief snippet of her being baptized as an adult. You actually have to look for an online interview where they promote the film where she actually explains her family history. Like it's like talked about slightly in the film, and she credits Wilson with bringing her to God. And I started thinking, like, wait a minute, did he make this movie because he wanted to make a point, or did he want to, to he thought her dream was interesting, or did he just want to recruit someone? Did he just want to recruit someone? Did he like? It just left me with this weird feeling, like she's breaking down in tears about how, despite her ideological conversion, she felt incredibly depressed about pretty much everything until she came to God, and now she's happy, and I think that's great. Like, I'm not a religious person, but there's nothing wrong with finding meaning in Christ, in my opinion. I don't find it may make you know I'm not on a what I think my always issue has been like, I personally, the God I was raised to believe in doesn't care if you're hawking him 24/7. The God I was raised to believe in doesn't care if you're trying to get more converts to spread his word. The God I was raised to believe in is one you have a relationship with. And that's where Mr. Wilson and Gothix and I kind of really part ways. I don't need to tell someone to find Christ because that's not my business. And there was just something about it. It's not so much that like she converted to Christianity. It's that like it's glossed over in a matter of minutes. That Mr. Wilson basically, after they shot the original footage of the documentary, he said, "Well, why don't you try this?" Like, it's like he's trying to do something that I'm not sure I'm because it's not like Gothix is a victim anymore. She's 31 years old. She's not like a wilting flower. I think she is very sealed off for understandable reasons, especially compared to her husband, who the more you see him, you're like, boy, I'd like to hang out with that guy. So I can't. There's just too much in the back half of Gothix that doesn't sit right with me, and kind of it feels manipulative in a way that I don't think the filmmaker or Gothix herself intended. But I do think it is the first half, dealing with the cancellation, the aftermath, is very instructive. Sometimes you don't need to like make your, trash somebody to get to have a good day. Sometimes you can just let that go. You see tweet after tweet of calling this woman horrible names, and by the end you're like, well, what did that mean? Like she didn't, she tried to move on with her life and just got more and more depressed. Like, it's not like she did anything bad. She just said, do we have to be so negative all the time and call people racist all the time? I may be a leftist, but like, I don't think, jumping to accusations of racism is particularly constructive. I don't think I think it's a real problem, but I do think if you're going to see it, it is instructive to watch this woman deal with just getting stomped on for what to me seemed like a perfectly normal response to to negativity that she didn't want to swim in. She didn't want to sit there and call people racists for not liking a black woman as Ariel. For me, I'm not sure I could call somebody a racist, but there's another part, voice inside me that says, well, what else are you going to call it? Because it's just a fantasy character. But, like, it's race swapping. We've been dealing with it for decades and it isn't going away. So getting mad about it, period, just seems like a waste of time. But anyway, those are my thoughts about the film. I'm pretty much probably the only person or left-leaning person who's ever actually looked at it. I mean, the only like professional review I found of it was by Alec Nugg Film Threat, and he's so ideologically captured, or captured that the film review was his usual gibberish. Um, if you like Gothix, you've probably already seen the movie. If you're looking for a different viewpoint, I would say it's the first half especially is worth watching. Anyway, those are my thoughts, and I'll see you next time.